Chapter 6 is all about how we as Americans form our political attitudes and beliefs through a process called political socialization, how we categorize those political opinions according to political ideology, and how we measure those opinions on a large scale through public opinion polling. So as we go into this, I'd like you to take a few minutes just to think about your own personal view on these questions. First, how interested would you say you are in politics? Very interested, fairly interested, not very interested, or not interested at all? Generally speaking, do you consider yourself a Republican, a Democrat, an independent, or something else? Do you support or oppose capital punishment or the death penalty? Do you support or oppose laws that would make it harder for people to get guns in the United States? Do you support or oppose allowing legally married gay couples to adopt children? Do you favor increasing or decreasing government spending on education? What about health care? Protecting the environment? Fighting the war on terrorism? And lastly, do you think abortion should be legal in all cases, legal in most cases, illegal in most cases, or illegal in all cases? These are questions that are taken from public opinion polling. Now let me ask you something that might not sit well with you for a minute. Did you choose your opinions in response to those questions? Or in some ways, did those opinions choose you based on your political socialization, in other words, your life experiences up to this point? Now, this isn't to suggest that you have been brainwashed. However, it's important to consider that much of the development of our political attitudes and beliefs takes place long before we are old enough to enter the voting booth. So nobody gets up on election day, for example, and says, I'm going to be a Republican today. This is not a one-time event that we form these opinions. It occurs continuously as a result of childhood experiences, and then these attitudes continue forming throughout adulthood as we experience new things that shape our attitudes and outlook throughout life. So political scientists have identified what they call agents of socialization. These are influences on your political beliefs. Now, they can be formal in the sense that transmission of political values through these agents might be very intentional, very conscious. However, in most cases, it's going to be unintentional or subconscious. The most powerful agent of socialization, not surprisingly, is the family. We spend the most time with our families, and most kids end up with the same party identification as their parents. When the parents are split in their party identification, kids tend to take on the identification of their mother. Now, parents can influence our political socialization in a lot of ways, but typically it's unconscious. As a parent, you quickly learn that children are like sponges. They soak everything up. They're constantly observing you, watching your attitudes, how you respond to different situations, and we could be teaching our children attitudes without even realizing it. For example, they might witness your response to police when you're pulled over. Are you respectful of people in positions of authority, or do you rail against the police? They're picking up on your attitudes toward people who are different from you, people of different socioeconomic status. What are your attitudes toward people in poverty? What are your attitudes toward people of different races? Children are constantly picking up on these attitudes, and when they reach adulthood, those attitudes are going to translate into a particular party identification. Something as subtle as your race and gender can also influence your political outlook. One study that was published by researchers at Arizona State University found that as young as the 8th grade, girls and boys are developing different political attitudes. You see, we have long identified what's called the gender gap in politics, that men tend to be more conservative, more Republican, women tend to be more liberal and Democrat. But even as young as the 8th grade, girls are more likely to support spending money on the environment, on education, on healthcare, less likely to support spending money on the war on terrorism than are young boys at that same grade. So I'd love for you to stop just for a minute and think about why that might be. Why at a young age do we see this gender gap emerging? What socialization experiences might be different for boys and girls as young as 8th grade? Post your thoughts here.